At dawn, the farm woke beneath a thin veil of fog, the kind that softened edges and made even broken things appear gentler than they were. Eli Mercer stood at the barn door with his hands tucked into the sleeves of his jacket, watching breath bloom and vanish in the cold. He had learned to measure mornings by what they asked him, and this one asked for nothing but patience. The land lay quiet, fields stitched with frost, fences bowed by years of neglect. The house behind him holding memories he kept shuttered like windows against a storm. The truck arrived without ceremony, its tires whispering over gravel, its engine idling as if unsure it belonged. A driver climbed down, papers flapping, apologizing before he explained. Names did not match. Destinations were crossed. The animal inside was not meant for this place. Eli listened with the careful stillness of a man accustomed to receiving bad news, nodding as if it were a weather report. He signed where the driver pointed. Not yet looking inside, already feeling the familiar weight of consequences settling on his shoulders. When the ramp lowered, the horse did not charge or rear. She stood in shadow, a tall shape held together by restraint and old injuries, her coat dulled by dust, her ribs whispering beneath skin. One eye caught the light and fixed on Eli with a watchfulness that felt older than fear. The driver called her problem, said she had buck trainers, refused gates, broken tack. The word slid off Eli like rain off tin, because he recognized the posture of endurance, the way pain teaches the body to become small. Eli approached slowly, every step measured, as if the space between them were a fragile bridge. He had once been quicker, louder, certain that effort could bend the world. Loss had pared him down to essentials. He knew now that attention mattered more than force. The horse shifted her weight, testing, then stilled. Her ears angled back not in threat, but in listening. Eli felt the echo of his own listening. The years spent waiting for a sound that never came, a voice that would not answer. The driver cleared his throat, impatience creeping in. There were forms of reverse, calls to make. Eli could send her back. He imagined the road swallowing her again, the next place harsher, the labels sticking like burrs. He imagined his own days continuing as they had, a narrow corridor between dawn and dark. The choice pressed against him with a clarity that surprised him. He reached for the latch and closed the ramp. The sound was soft, final. The driver stared, then shrugged, relief and confusion mingling, and left the papers on the hood. Eli led the horse into barn without a lead, simply walking and trusting she would follow or not. She followed. Inside, dust motes drifted like tiny planets. Hay smelled sweet and old, and the walls held the heat of animals long gone. Eli set water, then grain, then stepped back. The horse lowered her head cautiously, nostrils flaring, then took a mouthful. He watched her eat, counting breaths, counting seconds, letting the ordinary miracle of nourishment steady him. Outside, the sun climbed, burning off the fog and revealing the farm as it was, unvarnished and tired. Eli moved through his chores with focus he had not felt in years. He fixed a loose board, mended a wire, action small enough to complete, tangible enough to matter. Each time he passed a stall, the horse lifted her head and met his eyes. Not trust, not yet, but acknowledgement. It felt like the beginning of a language. By afternoon, the first visitor arrived, a neighbor boy with a bicycle too big for him, curiosity pulling him closer than caution. He leaned on the fence, silent, watching. Eli did not invite him in, did not send him away. The boy's presence added a new shape to the quiet. Later, an older man stopped by with a thermos, a veteran whose sleep had grown thin. He stood beside Eli without comment, sharing the warmth, both of them observing the horse as if she were a horizon. As dusk gathered, clouds bruised the sky, and the wind picked up, rattling the barn doors. The horse grew restless, shifting, pawing once then again. Eli felt the change before he saw it, the way a room tightens before a storm. He stepped into the stall, slow, speaking low, his voice a rope he hoped would hold. Thunder cracked close, a sudden violence that made the horse leap, eyes wide, muscles coiled. For a breathless moment, everything balanced on a knife edge. Eli moved closer, not to restrain but to be present, hands open, heart hammering. The horse swung her head, breast sharp, and for an instant the past crowded in every warning he'd been given, every reason to step back. Instead, he stayed. He grounded his feet, let the fear pass through him like weather, and whispered the only truth he had left, that he was here and would not leave. The horse shuddered, then stopped. Her breathing slowed, the storm passing over them both. When the thunder receded, Eli rested his palm against her neck. She did not flinch. The contact sent a quiet shock through him, a recognition that felt like relief. Outside, the boy and the veteran watched, eyes bright, understanding without explanation that something had shifted. The farm held its breath, then exhaled. Eli stepped back, smiling without realizing it, knowing the era that brought her here had cracked open a future he was finally ready to enter. Night settled with a gentler hand after that. Stars stitching light into the dark, the barn humming with the low music of animals at rest. Eli lingered, cleaning a tack hook, sweeping a corner already clean, unwilling to name the feeling rising in him. The horse stood easy now, weight cocked, eye half-lidded, as if she had decided the world might be survivable. The boy pedaled home slow. The veteran poured the last of his coffee into the dirt, and neither said goodbye, certain they would return. Alone again, Eli closed the doors and leaned his forehead against the wood, laughter surprising him, brief and unguarded. The future did not announce itself with fanfare. It arrived like this, earned and quiet, asking for courage tomorrow. As he turned out the light, thunder rolled far away, harmless now, and Eli understood the danger had passed only because he had chosen to stand still. Together, morning returned with a different quality, as if the light itself had learned something overnight. It slipped through the barn slats and pale ribbons, settling on dust and straw, touching the horse's back where her coat caught a faint copper glow. Eli arrived before the sun cleared the ridge, carrying grain in a quiet he no longer mistook for emptiness. He paused at the stall, listening. The horse lifted her head, ears forward this time, and the simple acknowledgement felt like a door opening inward. He did not rush the day. He set the bucket down and stepped away, letting her decide the distance. She ate, then stopped, watching him with an attention that felt deliberate. Eli leaned against the post, the wood rough beneath his palm, and breathed. The storm from the night before lingered in his body like an old ache, but it had softened. He realized he was no longer bracing himself against loss. He was orienting toward care, a subtle shift that changed how his shoulders held the weight of the world. Word traveled in small ways. The boy returned after school, this time a friend who spoke too loudly until he saw the horse's eyes and fell quiet. They stood together, hands in pockets, absorbing the calm as if it were a lesson. Eli showed them how to hold out an apple flat, how to wait. The horse approached, slow and dignified, took the fruit and chewed with solemn care. The boys exchanged a look that was half wonder, half relief, as if something they had not known how to name had just been given shape. In the afternoons, the veteran came back, setting his thermos on the fence and watching the horse move in the paddock. He spoke little, but when he did, it was to notice details, the way her tail flicked at flies, the rhythm of her steps. Eli listened, understanding that observation was a kind of prayer. The veteran slept in his truck one night, saying the quiet helped. He woke without the usual panic, surprised by the absence of dreams. He did not comment on it, but his hands shook less when he poured his coffee. Resistance still surfaced, sharp and unpredictable. One evening, a tarp snapped loose in the wind, and the horse spun, hove skidding. Eli felt the surge of fear rise, felt the old reflex to control, to impose. He stopped himself. He grounded his feet, softened his gaze, and waited. The horse circled, then slowed, then approached him, breathing hard but present. The moment did not end in triumph. It ended in steadiness, which felt better. Eli began to repair the farm with intention. He fixed the gate, reinforced the fence, cleaned out the stalls as if preparing for guests he could not yet imagine. His hands remembered how to work, how to build without urgency. He cooked meals that took time, ate them at the table instead of standing at the sink. He slept deeper, waking with a sense that the day ahead held something worth meeting. One afternoon, a woman arrived with a girl who would not meet anyone's eyes. The woman spoke in careful fragments about school, about silence that had stretched too long. Eli did not ask questions. He showed them where to stand, how to breathe. The girl watched the horse from a distance, then closer, then reached out a trembling hand. The horse lowered her head, nostrils flaring, accepting the touch. The girl's breath hitched, a sound like a door creaking open. She did not speak, but her fingers stayed, and when they left, she turned once to look back. Something lit behind her eyes. The farm took on a rhythm shaped by arrivals and departures. People came with their fractures wrapped in politeness, stayed for an hour or an afternoon, left a little lighter. Eli did not call it anything. He kept the gates open and the rules simple. Be slow. Be honest. Listen more than you speak. The horse became the center of this quiet orbit, her presence a steadying force that asked nothing and offered everything. Then came the night that tested what had been built. A summer storm rolled in hard and fast, lightning tearing the sky. Rain turned the yard into a river. The power went out, plunging the barn into darkness broken only by flashes of white. The horse panicked, slamming against the stall, fear roaring back with the storm. Voices rose outside as people who had stayed late rushed in, startled, unsure. Eli moved through the chaos with clarity that surprised him. He spoke low and steady, directing hands, opening doors, creating space. He entered the stall, heart pounding, and stood where the horse could see him. Lightning cracked, thunder followed, and the horse reared, close enough that Eli felt the wind of her movement. For a breathless instant, the risk felt absolute. He did not retreat. He lifted his hands, not to block but to offer, and anchored his voice in the one truth he trusted, that fear passes when met without resistance. The horse's hooves came down. Her breath slowed in increments, each one a small victory. Around them, the storm raged, but inside the stall, a fragile order held. When the power returned, the light revealed faces streaked with rain and tears. The veteran wiped his eyes. The woman held her daughter close. The boy stood shoulder to shoulder, awed. The horse stood calm, her head resting briefly against Eli's chest, a gesture so intimate it stole the breath from the room. In that stillness, Eli understood the shape of what was happening. The farm was no longer just his refuge. It was becoming a vessel, carrying others across their private storms. The shipping error that had delivered problem had uncovered a purpose, one that demanded courage not once but daily. As the rain eased and the night softened, Eli felt the weight of responsibility settle alongside gratitude. He did not know how far this would go, only that he would not turn away. The horse shifted, steady and present, and Eli knew the next chapter had already begun. Autumn returned before anyone noticed it had left, arriving on the farm with cooler nights and mornings that smelled like apples and damp earth. The horse's coat thickened, catching burrs and sunlight, and Eli learned the language of her moods the way one learns weather, by paying attention to small shifts. A tightened jaw meant memories stirring. A softened I meant the day would be kind. He adjusted without thinking, his body responding before his mind could argue. In this quiet responsiveness, he felt himself changing, not into someone new, but back into someone he had misplaced. The farm filled gradually, never all at once. A bus from the nearby school began stopping on Fridays, dropping off children whose teachers spoke in hushed tones about anger, withdrawal, fear. The kids arrived loud, then quieted as the barn received them. Eli taught them how to sweep, how to carry buckets without spilling, how to stand beside a 1,000-pound animal without needing to dominate her. The horse accepted them with a patience that felt deliberate, as if she knew exactly why they had come. One afternoon, a boy named Lucas refused to step inside the gate. He stood rigid, jaw clenched, fists tight, eyes darting for exits. Eli did not coax. He leaned on the fence and waited, mirroring the boy's stillness. The horse grazed nearby, unbothered, the sound of her tearing grass steady and rhythmic. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, Lucas stepped forward, then back, then forward again. When he reached out and touched the horse's shoulder, his breath left him in a rush, a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. Eli turned away to give him privacy, knowing some moments required witnesses but not attention. The veteran began staying longer, sleeping less in his truck and more in the small room Eli cleared for him. He helped mend roofs, replaced broken hinges, told stories late at night when the stars pressed close. The stories were not heroic. They were fragments of fear and regret, offered without expectation of absolution. The horse would stand nearby during these confessions, her presence a grounding weight. On the first night the veteran slept through until dawn, he woke startled, then smiled, a fragile thing that felt earned. Not everything softened. Rumors traveled, as they always do. Some people called it foolish, said Eli was risking everything for strangers and a damaged animal. A county official stopped by, talking about liability, permits, the dangers of informal sanctuaries. Eli listened, nodded, thanked him for his concern. That night, he lay awake, the weight of responsibility heavy, doubt creeping in around the edges. The horse shifted in the barn, hooves thudding softly, and the sound steadied him. He rose before sunrise and began to plan, not grandly, but carefully, with the same patience he used in the stall. Winter came hard. Snow piled against the fences, turning the world white and unforgiving. The barn became a refuge of warmth and breath, steam rising from animals and people alike. Attendance thinned, then returned as the novelty of hardship faded. One evening, a family arrived after dark, their car sliding slightly in the drive. They had heard about the horse, about the quiet. The mother's eyes were red, the father's hand shaking. Their daughter stayed in the car, refusing to move. Eli wrapped himself in a coat and walked out into the cold. He did not knock on the window. He stood beside the car, breathing with the night, until the girl opened the door on her own. She followed him slowly, each step tentative. Inside the barn, the horse lifted her head and waited. The girl approached, tears freezing on her lashes, and pressed her forehead against the horse's neck. She stood like that for a long time, the storm inside her easing in increments too small to measure, but large enough to matter. Spring arrived with mud and promise. The farm looked different now. Fences straightened, fields turned, laughter woven into the air. Eli realized one morning that he was no longer alone in the decisions. A community had formed without declaration, bound by shared care. The horse moved among them like a quiet anchor, her once wary eyes now soft, her presence a steady constant. The day of the accident came without warning. A visiting teen slipped on wet ground, falling hard, panic flaring as old trauma rushed back. Voices rose, fear contagious. The horse startled, stepping sideways, tension rippling through the group. Eli felt the moment tipping, the fragile balance threatened. He moved forward, voice calm, hands open, creating a circle of stillness around the boy. He asked the others to step back, to breathe. The horse approached on her own, lowering her head near the boy's shoulder. The boy's breathing slowed, his body unclenched. He reached out, fingers gripping mane, grounding himself in the solid warmth beside him. The panic passed like a wave breaking and receding. Silence followed, thick and reverent. In that silence, Eli felt the full weight of what had been built, and what could still be lost. The farm was no longer an accident. It was a promise. He looked at the faces around him, at the horse standing steady at the center, and understood that the true risk had never been failure. It was turning away once you knew what staying could do. As the group dispersed and the day settled into evening, Eli rested his hand on the horse's neck, feeling the slow, sure pulse beneath his palm, and knew the greatest test was still ahead. The summer that followed carried a different weight, dense with expectation. The farm no longer felt like a secret whisper from one person to the next. It had become a place people drove toward deliberately, windows down, nerves tight, hope held carefully so it wouldn't break. Eli felt the shift most in the mornings. Where once he had woken to silence, now there were lists to keep in his head, feed schedules, borrowed hands arriving early, thermoses set on the fence like quiet offerings. Purpose had texture. It asked something of him every day. The horse bore the changes with a patience that seemed almost intentional. She moved through the growing crowd as if she understood the geometry of pain, stopping where she was most needed, retreating when presence might overwhelm. Eli watched her carefully, alert for signs of strain. There were moments when her ears pinned back, when the old tension rippled through her body, and on those days, he closed the gates early, sent people home gently, choosing protection over momentum. It cost him. Turning someone away always did. But he had learned that care was not the same as availability. One afternoon, a woman arrived alone, her hand shaking so badly she struggled to latch the gate. She had lost her husband the previous winter. She said, the words tumbling out in a rush that suggested she had been holding them too long. Eli listened, nodding, guiding her toward the paddock where the horse stood dozing. The woman stopped several feet away. Rooted, Eli did not push. He stayed with her, breathing, until she stepped forward on her own. When she touched the horse's shoulder, her knees buckled. Eli caught her elbow, steadying without holding, and felt the familiar ache of recognition settle in his chest. That evening, Eli sat alone on the fence as the sun sank low, painting the fields gold. He felt the exhaustion then, a bone-deep weariness that no sleep quite touched. Responsibility pressed in from all sides, and doubt crept close. He wondered how long he could sustain this, whether he was strong enough to keep choosing presence over retreat. The horse lifted her head from grazing and walked toward him, stopping close enough that he could feel her warmth. She stood there, unasked, a quiet answer to a question he had not voiced. The next week brought the county official back, this time with papers and a measured tone. There were requirements now, inspections, rules that would need to be followed if the farm was to continue as it had been. Eli felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct to withdraw, to protect what he had built by shrinking it. He asked for time. He spent the night pacing the barn, hand on the horse's neck, thinking through every possible outcome. By morning, he had made his decision. Growth would be slower, harder, but it would be real. He would not let fear dictate the limits of care. Volunteers stepped forward when he asked, surprising him. The veteran took on repairs with renewed focus. The boys swept and hauled without complaint. The woman with trembling hands returned, bringing lunch and quiet determination. The farm reshaped itself again, this time with intention layered over accident. Eli felt the strain ease, replaced by a steadier resolve. The horse aged subtly through it all. Her steps slowed, her muzzle silvered, but her presence deepened. She no longer startled at sudden sounds. Children leaned against her sides as if she were a wall. Eli brushed her every evening, noticing the places where muscles softened, where old scars had faded to memory. He spoke to her then, not with words meant to instruct, but with gratitude he no longer tried to hide. One late afternoon, a boy arrived with his mother, eyes fixed on the ground. He had been sent away from every program that promised help. She said, her voice flat with disappointment. Eli led them to the barn and stepped back. The boy stood rigid, arms crossed, jaw set. The horse approached slowly, stopping just short. She waited. Minutes passed. Then the boy lifted his head and met her gaze. Something shifted. He reached out, hesitated, then pressed his forehead to hers. A sound escaped him, low and raw, the beginning of speech after long silence. His mother covered her mouth, tears spilling unchecked. Eli felt his knees weaken. He leaned against the stall, breath shaking, the enormity of the moment settling over him. This was it, he realized, not a single miracle, but the accumulation of thousands of small, patient choices converging into something undeniable. The horse stood steady, eyes soft, bearing the weight of another person's return to himself. As dusk gathered, people lingered longer than usual, reluctant to break the spell. The farm hummed with a low, shared reverence. Eli moved among them, offering water, quiet words, his presence now confident where it had once been tentative. When the last car pulled away and the night settled in, he stood alone with the horse, the barn warm and breathing around them. He rested his forehead against her neck and closed his eyes. The future loomed uncertain and demanding, but it no longer frightened him. Whatever came next would be met the same way this had been met. Slowly, honestly, together, the horse shifted, steady and sure, and Eli felt the answer in his bones. Like, subscribe and stay with us, because the next story waiting for you may be the one that heals a part of you you didn't even know was hurting.